Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. We so appreciate it. We have a cozy little gathering here today, and it's nice, beautiful, such a beautiful day. Gorgeous, man. Fall in September. My birthday, September 23rd. I don't ever remember it being bad weather on my birthday. Honest to goodness, it's always been beautiful. And so we're eating good food. We have all kinds of stuff. I don't even know what you would call tonight. We have meatloaf, which is very good. We have our deviled eggs. Thank you, Gloria. We have homemade salsa. We have pumpkin everything, chicken nachos. Now, Charlotte, Miss Charlotte, she chicken everything or pumpkin everything. That is from her garden. From one pumpkin, did you say? Good lands. Must have been a giant. Must have been a. She didn't know what it was. Well, we're eating it. Whatever it is, we're not positive, but I smell it, and it smells pumpkiny. My son Doyle, he eats everything pumpkin, so he's a pumpkin freak. So, and I say that with love. And also pumpkin pie in there. That's crazy. I mean, we got pumpkin everything. It's all good stuff, and all good stuff along with it. So, if you're in the Delaware, Maryland, Pennsylvania, New Jersey area, you really need to think about. You missed it right now, but you really need to think about coming sometime. We're meeting in Middletown, Delaware, right now, today. Hey, thank you, Craig from New York. Happy birthday to me. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And say hello to your beautiful bride, Louise, for me. But let me just say this, that this is this is one of those things. Jill and John, the Stabley family, host us 99.7% of the time, and Jill, her mother passed and went on to heaven, and so the memorial service was this week, and it was beautiful. It was very well done, lovely, and so Jill and John are getting some very much needed rest. So we pray for them. Also, in the state of Delaware, there was a teen couple. Really, they're well known to our friends Karen and Paul Campanella and the Campanella family, and so they asked me to pray for and they're teenagers, so I better not say their name, but they were in a terrible car crash, I think in Kennett Pike or that area, and so the condition of the young man is not good, but the young lady is improving, as I understand it. So we want to be thinking about them. I will say this: it is a crazy, crazy time in life for everybody. And I will also say this, that I know people who work very, 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 very hard, and they're good people. They love their families. They love, they love their family life to the extent that they're able to have it. Um, but their life is really, how do I put this? It's really kind of driven by their work. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that today. And I will say this, that this won't be difficult in that it's hard to hear. It's not going to be hard to hear or understand. But today's message is going to be hard to hear in part because it departs from what most people have been taught their entire lives. And I will say, by the way, chat is open, and I always forget to say that. I think I do always forget to say it, or maybe I think I forget, but I don't. In the process of forgetting, I remember. So that's fun with brain injuries right there, right? So let me say, and I do want to really address this up front, because this is going to be heady stuff. From the standpoint, it's stuff you've not heard before, and it's going to be a different take on something that I think will kind of trip you out a little bit. But hang with me. I'm going to get through as much as I can today. I don't want to wear you all out. You'll be trying to go. The ones who are listening in the post broadcast, they're listening to the playback. They'll be like, my bedtime is 9:32, and now it's now 11:32, and so if I've got bags under my eyes tomorrow, it's Dr. Sean's fault. So you can pause it if you have the app, the iPhone app. You pause it wherever you pause it, it keeps it. Great news. Google finally approved my Android app, or my Android photographs and all that stuff. And so it's in development right now, and it should be out probably this week or next. So we're super excited. We paid for it, so you don't have to. So it's free to download for you. And I don't know what you call spam you, or I don't even know how to do that. So no worries about that. Thank you to everybody, by the way, who listened to Wednesday's show. And I'm going to say this. The Wednesday show, the chat room was on fire. It was really neat to see that many people in there really enjoying it. It is a very interactive place, and there's some great people in there. And this one I found out I can throttle too, so I throttled that one. I don't like. I've been on some internet shows where they ask me to take calls or answer chat questions, and there's been like 1,000 people in chat, and I look at that, and they have, they pay people to go and do the chat. I don't have that, so I don't know how they even keep up with somebody they pay, but they were firing questions at me. And I thought to myself, I'm glad I only keep it down to a certain number. But it is a really, really neat thing. Smart people in there and funny people. Smart and funny. So and a lot of interesting information, especially on the Wednesday show. The Wednesday show, boy, you're gonna get a prepping lesson big time. It's really, really cool. So this Wednesday, we're going to have a show kind of off the hook. It's going to be a little bit wild, but it'll be fun. You may never listen again after you listen to Wednesday's show. It'll be controversial big time, but it'll be fun. Fun for me, and maybe that's good. It'll be fun for me because I might be the only one listening after Wednesday. So if ever there was a teaser, that is the one. So, I know people who are very, very hard workers. And I'm going to be honest with you. I'm a pretty hard worker. Now, obviously, with what happened to me, my work changes. It's a change now. But I still think people, if they saw me work, they would consider me to be a pretty hard worker. Now, hello, John. John, I won't say his last name because he's a different name, but from Tennessee, y'all. Tuning in. Good to have you. We miss you, brother. We love you, man. John was a long-time attender. He was here in the kind of the very beginning, and they picked up on faith and moved to Tennessee, and we've been to their home, and boy, oh boy, what a place. Wow. This is kind of a dreamy little place, so we're glad for he and Diane, and so that's awesome. That's neat to have you listening. See that, how chat goes? So anyway, I was saying I do know people that their identity is their work. And I don't mean they're a physician, they're military, they're a firefighter, they're a police officer. I don't mean any of that. I mean their identity, their worth is how much and how often and how consistently they work. Their identity becomes that work. Oh, I'm a perfectionist. What do we often hear? I'm a perfectionist. I'm a workaholic. Now, I will say this. Before I got hurt, you were smiling at me. I don't even know what you're talking about. Your smile is kind of, I don't even know what that's about. Anyway, sensitive much? So before I got hurt, I worked 80 plus hours a week every week. I was in school full time, doctorate and master's, the whole deal, and I worked, ran a business, and kind of ran two businesses, and I was just a very active person. But I will say this: I remember this will fit in. It'll make some sense to you. I remember talking to people who would say, "Whew, man, work is killing me." I'm like, "Really, really? What happened?" I'm always interested because I'm always interested in people's what they do for a living. I think it's neat. It's just neat. I think it's interesting. When I ask, I meet somebody new and I say, well, what do you do? What do you do for a living? I'm not asking it because I'm prying, although I am prying. That's not the primary reason. The reason I'm asking them is I find it fascinating how people, support themselves and their families and what they lay their hand to that brings them goodness and wealth and security, financial security, and all of these things. All that said to say this, I talk to somebody sometimes and they'd say, oh, yeah, man, work is killing me. They're wearing me out over there. I say, oh, well, what do you do? And they tell me, and then they say, I worked 46 hours last week. I worked 46 hours. I mean, over 6 days because they had me come in on 7 hours on Saturday. Can you believe that? 7 hours? What kind of slave place? I I would just first I'd look at him like the RCA dog, turn my head a little sideways, huh? But then after a while I just started to say, well, isn't that something? Because I was working 80 plus hours, and I thought, I don't know why I thought everybody did that, and this is not to demean anybody that works 40 hours or less. My point in this is when you run your own business, you find you work a lot of hours. And people that don't run their own business, they really don't understand that concept. When I was in the military and post-military government work, I can tell you it's nothing to work 12s, 16s, rolling 16s. It's a little nutty. I mean, and you're 12 on, 12 off, 12 on, 12 off. You only work half days. You just choose which 12 hours you want to work. So that's kind of the mindset I want you to have in the back of your mind. Now, there's retired people here, and there's young people that are working and going to school, and there's people that work full-time jobs, and so the paradigm may very well be different for each of us. But I think it's important to start with that premise of that whole bunch of work. Your work is your identity, and it'll tie in a little bit. So Exodus 31:14, this is the New American Standard. Therefore you are to observe the Sabbath, for it is holy to you. Everyone who profanes it shall surely be put to death, for whoever does any work on it, that person shall be cut off from amongst his people. That's Exodus 31:14. Now, in an internet article titled How to Honor the Sabbath, we find the following claim. Now, I have to give props to my good professor, Skip Moen, because if you want to get in a deep discussion on Sabbath, just go to a blues place and just keep him supplied with libations, and you'll get a heavy dose of some serious Sabbath talk. So he said this in an internet article, How to Honor the Sabbath, we find the following claim. The Sabbath is, above all, a day of complete rest, both from our occupation in earning a living and from any activity that would cause physical exertion and draws us away from the purpose of this day. It is a day to be spent exclusively honoring Yahweh and His Son. And then they claim some include some references, Exodus 31, Genesis 2 and 3, and Exodus 20, 8 through 11. Now, of course, we can see that this author, he's really extended this. Any work, any exertion, he doesn't say work, he says any exertion, so any exertion at all. So he has pushed this meaning, and we would call that extra-biblical delineation, extra-biblical teaching outside of or in addition to what the Bible actually says. And so they've done that here. They've included a reference to the Messiah. We understand why they did it, but it's important to understand that was incorrect. Now, what do we know that's true? The Sabbath is, in fact, a day of rest. Now, most of us around would say that today is Sabbath. Today's our Sabbath. We, in Christian terms, most people don't use the word Shabbat or Sabbath. I use Shabbat or Sabbath interchangeably. Some folks just say Sunday. But here's the thing. Some people, they Sabbath on Saturday. And then some big argument gets started. Well, you're using the wrong day. You're, blah, blah, blah. And, I hate to say it, but that's not even the right day. I have friends that are Seventh-day Adventists that Saturday, they literally exist on the work that they've done the other days and don't do anything else except for eat, basic bodily functions, and rest. They really do. They don't read books. They don't, turn a television on. It's just a very, very different sort of way of being. But that's their Saturdays. But then there's a whole other group, Messianics. When do you Shabbat? When does Shabbat start? Right. But when does Sunset Friday, right? Sunset Friday, thereabouts. And then it goes into Saturday. So there's these three different ones. So which one probably Jewish person came up with it? We have to assume God is in some way, shape, or form Jewish because, that's where he put Yeshua HaMashiach. So all that said to say this, we have to assume that's probably, if we're going to split hairs, that's the one, Friday into Saturday. So we got three things there. Basically, we have three things we got to decide from. That's a personal thing that each person has to decide and just roll with it. But we can agree the Sabbath is indeed a day of rest. The only question really is not what day it is. It's not what day you have it on. It's what does rest mean? What does it mean to rest? Do any of you here know anybody that loves to garden? Right? Yeah, right. We're eating the fruits of your labors there, and the tomatoes that are in our garden come from Dr. Bonnie and Steve. Yeah, from her compost pile. She's going to throw it away. That's like when I was a kid. I used to eat. I was skinny as a rail, but my mom would say I was the next best thing to a garbage can. This is what I learned. She'd say, "Look, if you don't eat that, I'm going to throw it out." Right? I'm right next to the garbage can, so if you don't eat it, we're throwing it out. None never got really thrown out. I'm going to be honest. I went ahead and ate it. But to somebody who gardens, rest is fun. You do things that you enjoy, right? Maybe gardening. You sit out on your porch and knit or read or take in some sun or organize stuff, that I haven't gotten to this. Maybe you find some people find puzzles relaxing and they rest when they do puzzles. I don't know. I really don't know. I know race car drivers and professional race car drivers, and to them, it is very much work to drive their personal vehicle on the highway, but their race car, they love it so much. One of them told me point blank, he's retired in the Hall of Fame now, but he told me at about, I guess it was a little after midnight in a parking lot. He said, I had cooked up burgers and dogs and stuff in a grocery store parking lot. I drove up, and who was it? Mark Martin, at that time my favorite driver, drove the number 6, and so they invited me to have some burgers and some dogs. Why not? It's Mark Martin. Sure, I will. And he told me, he said, don't tell anybody this. Now, he's retired now, so I can tell it. It's declassified. He said, listen, I would drive on Sunday for free. If they didn't pay me, I like that they pay me, but I sure would drive for free. He said, I used to drive for free for years. 10, 15 years I drove for free. I'm paying the money. My father's paying the money. He said, sure enough, I sure would do it for free. But it's hard work. At the end of 500 miles, at almost 200 miles per hour, whole lot of turning left, they lose 7 to 11 pounds. Yeah, for real. They lose a lot of weight. And that's why they have to hydrate, or they'll get so dehydrated that causes them problems, physical problems. Yeah, it's amazing. So my point in all that is, and I made it as complicated as I possibly could, I love to do certain things. I love photography. I love shooting my bow. I love playing with my dog. But this fella here says anything, let's see here, that would cause physical exertion and draw us away from the purpose of this day. Well, draw us away from the purpose of this day. Well, that seems important. We should probably talk about that. We'll do that in just a minute. But the day of rest, what does rest mean? We got to fix that in our head. Some folks don't know what rest is. Listen, I don't know if you would call me a workaholic back then or not, back in the day. I don't think you would. Really? I don't think so. I really don't think so. I wasn't addicted to work. There was a lot of work that needed to be done. And in my mind, okay, I'm responsible. I got to do it. So I did it. But look here. If I could shoot my bow and arrow, play with my dog, and take photographs all day long, I would do it. I would do it. I never think I'd ever be working a day in my life. It'd be so much fun. But there's a problem with that, so we got to resolve that. So you'll notice this author claims rest is the equivalent of ceasing from any activity that would cause physical exertion. But reflection on this broad definition quickly demonstrates its fallacy. It's wrong on its face. Anything that causes physical exertion would include opening your eyes upon waking, getting out of bed, brushing your teeth, going to the restroom, getting dressed, or any number of ordinary, necessary daily actions. Even if these were exempted, the list doesn't stop there. Reading God's Word, right? What you can do on the Sabbath, read God's Word. Well, you got to turn a page, right? By this example, praying takes physical exertion. Got to exert yourself to pray. Singing psalms takes physical. It's all. Look, if we break it down and we say, okay, well, maybe this fellow's got something here. Well, maybe he doesn't, because Unfortunately, in this case, there's some holes in that statement. Now, obviously, the author of this piece that I read earlier, he didn't intend to exclude these actions. Nevertheless, he does so by overstating the prohibition of work. Just broadly stated work. Now, I'm just going to tell you, I ran the sweeper. That's what we call it. I ran the vacuum before anybody got here. I don't mind it. I don't mind running the vacuum. When I physically can, I like to do it. Now, I don't do it very much, but the bottom line is I don't mind it so bad. It's Sunday. Is today my Shabbat or my Sabbath or my day of rest? No. Why? What am I doing right now? I'm speaking to 10, 15 people out there. Now, waking up. Jerry from Pennsylvania says, waking up is real work. Now, I do have the numbers in, by the way, from Wednesday, and I thought they would be much, much worse than they were. But they're actually, we're just under 1 million. We're just like 941. We were at 1.8 million when we made the move to Spreaker, and we're hoping and praying that we can build that back up, maybe even more. The more the merrier. Here's my thing. There is a temptation in Scripture to overstate some things, to suit ourselves, and to understate some things to suit ourselves. So this overstated command offers the same opening provided by Chava's overstatement in Genesis 3. You'll see who that person is. Chava is, anybody know who Chava is? Eve. Eve, Chava. Chava is Eve. Adam and Chava. So Genesis 3, we'll just start with this. Why not? This is a complete Jewish Bible. That's the translation I'm using. Now the serpent was more crafty than any wild animal which Adonai God had made. In other words, God didn't make the snake to be a snake. He was assuming a different role. There wasn't a snake there. God didn't make him to be a snake. Now the serpent was more crafty than any wild animal which Adonai God had made. He said to the woman, did God really say you are not to eat from any tree of the garden? Now what we can deduce from that, since we're little detectives, is that this snake wasn't exactly a snake. What was it? It was Satan assuming the form of a snake. You're welcome. That's free of charge, no cost or obligation to you. He said to the woman, did God really say you are not to eat from any tree in the garden? Let me just say this. If you are in a garden and a snake starts to talk to you, first of all, text me fast because I want to see that, because I want to be around something like that. Although you might ought to run. Snakes start talking to you, or maybe back off the libations a little bit. You might have picked up a couple mushrooms in there, little mind-altering stuff going on. Did God really say you're not to eat from any tree in the garden? This is what the serpent says, and the serpent is obviously Satan. The woman answered the serpent, we may eat from the fruit of the trees of the garden, but about the fruit of the tree in the middle of the garden, God said, you are neither to eat from it nor touch it, or you will die. Now, this is important, and you may have read over this 155 times in your lifetime. The serpent said to the woman, it is not true that you will surely die, because God knows that on that day you eat from it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. Now, what did Chava or Eve of Eve say? She blew that up a little bit. She added, she embellished, right? 7 steps of lying. Several weeks ago we did 7 steps of lying, 7 levels of lying. Well, she was at one of the levels of lying. She embellished. She embellished here. The serpent said to the woman, it is not true. She told a lie, and he caught her on it, and he called her out. Just like Adam or Chava, building a fence around the Torah mitzvah can actually diminish or even destroy the credibility of the instruction. Imagine trying to explain to someone who is not Torah observant that prohibition of work on the Sabbath includes all physical exertion. Now, the ridiculous nature of such a command removes the credibility of God's word by making God's commandment a farce. Listen, you don't want to add to stuff. If it's the Bible, let's not add to it. If you want to understand it deeper, I've had people tell me all the time. They say, man, I don't understand the Bible anywhere near as much as I want to, and I have to concur with them. I've had 11 years of postgraduate education on the Bible, and I don't understand it like I want to. That's just the bottom line. It's okay. Don't feel bad about that. I'm still working on it. You can too. I'll help you any way I can if you help me. The ridiculous nature of such a command removes the credibility of God's word by making God's commandment a farce. Can we somehow, when we're representing God's word, can we make it a little bit farcical? Can we maybe make it right? Well, yeah, a lot of shaking heads. Sometimes when we add stuff to stuff, we mess it up. We see that in politics and television all the time, right? Mainstream media add stuff, take stuff away, and it makes news hashtag fake news, and that's an important thing. And what happens when that happens? Then you don't believe the person. You don't believe them. And if you're talking about scripture, you're talking about, the handbook, and you're adding stuff, you get known to add stuff, take stuff away. Well, that's a problem, and people aren't going to believe you. So here's lesson number 1. State what God requires precisely, no more and no less. People say, well, that's basically what the Bible says. Well, that's basically what it means. No, it can't be basically. It's got to be what it means. And how do we find out what it means? Here's my thing, folks. I'll just give this to you free of charge, no cost or obligation to you too. There's got to be some study of Hebrew involved, and there's got to be some study of Greek. A little bit more so Hebrew because it's the origin. But the fact of the matter is you got to dig in a little bit, just a little bit. You got to dig in a little bit. There are lots of great commentaries out there that explain what the Hebrew word is for what, and you're getting a little bit of that here. But we don't want to add. We don't want to take away. We don't want to add. That's very important. So Dr. Moen recently investigated the fact that the word translated work in this verse and in the related verses about prohibitions on the Sabbath is not avodah, the usual word for physical exertion or work, nor is it the contrasting amal or yaga, which is toil. It's melacha, from the assumed root lach, the same root that produces malach, or messenger, or malachut, which is message, and is often described angels as messengers. Melacha is not any physical exertion, but rather those actions that are involved in creative projects, particularly those requiring skills and benefits. Now, I'm going to freak right here. Y'all are going to trip on this. God ceased from his craftsmanship, his creativity of making something that didn't exist on the seventh day. And in Scripture, that is called the Sabbath. Come on, right? Didn't that hit you in the head with a 2x4? The word used, this is why the Hebrew is so important if you want to understand the beautifulness, not a word, of, is it a word? Beautifulness. Beauty, we say. Beautifulness sounds more, got a little something more to it. So, if we want to understand the beauty of the word and the power and the meaning, man, we got to understand that. That's powerful. Melacha is not any physical exertion, but rather those actions are particularly involved in creative projects, particularly those requiring skills and benefits. Can we argue with any success that creation, being created by the Creator, fits that? It fits that. Now, do we think Adonai needed? Hashem needed? Elohim, do we think he needed to rest? No, that wasn't what it was about. He ceased bringing something new into existence by fashioning prior substances. He rested from creativity that had benefit. He was creating stuff. He was on a roll. He was on a roll. And yet, when the momentum was really rocking and rolling, he took a break. We're going to hear about more about that in a minute. He rested from creativity that had benefit, and Sabbath, you see, is a day of rest from creative activity in order to honor God's finished creative work. Even he took a break to honor his finished creative work. By ceasing to produce whatever is newly fashioned on this day, we acknowledge the sovereignty of the Creator who brought all that is into existence. It is ultimately all his work, even if we are involved in fashioning it. It's all about God. It's all, everything we do, yard work, when you have work farm day, it's all about God. When you are a painter or a photographer, it's all about God. When you are a teacher teaching people, it's all about God. If you're a fireman, it's all about God. If you're a retired person, but you lay your hand to cooking or helping someone, any of those things, it's all about God if we let it be. Now, there's some other more specific prohibitions. Don't think it stops there. But we shouldn't extend these ideas to include more than what's commanded. We can agree on that. So we don't want to cast God's word in a bad light. We don't want his word to be challenged because we're misrepresenting it. We just do what he says. Remember I said last week or the week before or sometime 100 times before, people ask me, what should I do? What is God's calling on my life? I don't know. But until then, trust and obey, for there's no other way to be happy in Jesus but to trust and obey. Simple song. Little kids learn it. It's that simple. Just do that. Don't make more of it than what it is, because that's enough. If we want to extend the range of the mitzvah so that we find application in our particular circumstances, then let us do it with cautions and let's be tolerant and understand of the understanding. We got to be tolerant of the understanding that to extend it in any way becomes opinion, right? Well, my opinion of what this means is this. Now, we've pretty clear, right? Creation. It's creation, creating the creative work. That's what we're doing. We're putting a stop momentarily to the creative work. That is rest. But we don't want to push this more because then, we make all ourselves look bad. Now, a lot of people will say to me, and I'll tell you, I've worked rotating shifts. I've worked 7-day swing all the way around the clock, 7 days of midnights, 2 days off, or 3 days off, 7 days of day work, followed by 1.5 days off, 7 days of evenings. Started over again. Brutal. When I was a police officer, that's what we worked. That was the crazy shift we worked. A lot of military people work crazy shifts, depending on what you do. Law enforcement, firemen, they work crazy shifts. It's a nutty sort of thing. And a lot of them would say to me, oh, well, what do I do, Doc? I don't want to be in some kind of trouble. And there were a lot of police officers who would object. They would say, I have to conscientiously object to working on Sundays. Or if they were a seventh day, I worked with a couple 7th-day guys, they couldn't work on Saturdays. They said, I'll work any other day you want me to, but I can't work on Saturdays. And the police officer was just told what anybody else would be told. Well, maybe you should go do some other job. If you don't want to work on Saturdays, you should probably become a teacher. Because we work every day, and you could get called in. If you're in detectives, you get called in on any day. You have to work. You can't go, well, right? You don't want to call the fire department, call 911. Hey, listen, my house is on fire. Can you all come put it out? Well, you see, you just called the firehouse at its 7th-day Adventist, and we don't work on no Saturdays. So sorry about your luck. Call back tomorrow. Nobody wants that. That's reality. That's a real circumstance that can happen to people, that you can't have this happening. You have to take for what it is. Your job is your job, right? There's important jobs. How about surgeons? Well, we don't get help on Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, depending on what faith you are. You get rushed to the hospital, you get in a car crash, you get rushed to the hospital, you're not going to get help? Come on, that's not realistic at all, is it? Everything shuts down. Well, you were unlucky. You got hurt on the Sabbath. You fell down your steps on the Sabbath. You crashed your car on the Sabbath. You cut yourself real bad arterially on the Sabbath. Sorry about that fish hook you got through your jugular. We're not going to be able to help you. Shouldn't have been fishing on the Sabbath. I don't know if you read. Right? Reeling that big thing in is work. No, come on. That makes it silly. Makes it silly. Let me just say this. If in honoring the Sabbath, you make more of it than what it is, we can't have it both ways, right? We've got to have it the right way. We can't have it the lesser. We can't have it the more. Because when you do that, you're making an agreement with yourself that you're going to follow what you believe to be the case while acknowledging it's really more than what's required of you. Is there benefit in adhering more than less? More than the right amount? Is there any benefit at all to adhering more to the rule than the rule? How about less? Is there a benefit to, if we're looking at it, is there a benefit to doing less? No. It's what's the amount you're supposed to do? The rule, the law, the commandment. More is still good as long as you understand that you're doing more and you're agreeing to it, and that's not what's been asked of you. So I have this friend. She was ahead of me when I got my doctorate at Masters. When we walked graduation, she was ahead of me. She was the person ahead of me, and her husband, they're Native American, and her husband's name is Barry, and so Barry's this brilliant guy, and they live messianic lifestyle. They live, but they are the biggest Native American real estate, 100% Native American owned real estate firm in the country. Pretty cool. And yet they are messianic Christians, and that's something. Native American, and yet they do that. Really super smart guy. And so Barry wrote this, and I think it's really, really fantastic. Somebody wants to know where that is. It's in Evansville, Indiana. mdivs.edu. Now, to set the stage on the topic, understanding full well, and I'm quoting Barry Jenkins, full well that you may take significant issue with what I'm about to teach. Don't feel bad. This is me, by the way. This is not him yet. Even world-famous preachers and teachers get it a bit wrong. Let me say that again. I'm going to set the stage for you because it's going to mess with your head. Understanding full well, you may take significant issue with what I'm about to teach. Don't feel bad. Even world-famous preachers and teachers get it a bit wrong. Now, let me preface that with, prior to 2006, I got it wrong. I was wrong. From when I was a little boy up until 2006, which I don't even know how old I was at that time. Whatever age I was, that's what it was. And that's when I finally saw some of the light, a little flicker of light. In 2001, the famous and revered teacher, Dr. John MacArthur Jr., the pastor of Grace Community Church, one of the most revered teachers of all time, he was asked about what are the Sabbath laws binding on Christians today. So he gets that gotcha question, right? Everybody wants to ask a famous preacher. So tell us again about the Sabbath. They'll always go to that. Are you pre-trib or post-trib? Are you pre-millennial or, they come up with all these things. But this is one of the big ones on the Sabbath. This is how he responded. Now, I have great respect for John MacArthur. I don't want you to think by me saying this, I'm quoting him, and then I'll have some stuff to say. He responded as follows: we believe the Old Testament regulations governing Sabbath observances are ceremonial, not moral, aspects of the law. As such, they are no longer in force, but have passed away along with the sacrificial system, the Levitical priesthood, and all other aspects of Moses' law that prefigured Christ. Now, according to a 2008 edition of Pulpit Magazine, Dr. MacArthur, Pulpit Magazine, it just cracks me up. Preachers get a magazine called Pulpit. That just cracks me up. That's not in there. This is not what Barry wrote. That's extra. That's other than Barry. Extra Barry. Dr. MacArthur reasoned in part that the New Testament never commands Christians to observe the Sabbath. This appears to be a standard evangelical answer concerning the Sabbath observance by New Testament believers. New Testament in quotes. How many in this room, prior to coming under my teaching or Dr. Moen's teaching, would have thought that? Right? We all agree. Sure. It's fair. It's okay. Me too. Me too. Up until 2006, I was a me too-er. Me too-er. That was me. Right? I'm right along with y'all. The term New Testament believers just drives me crazy, doesn't it? Does it drive you crazy? Drives me crazy. So we ignore the Old Testament? Oh, I'm an Old Testament believer. Oh, no, I'm a New Testament believer. Oh, well, tell me more. How do I become a New Testament believer? I like new better than old, right? That's not how it works. So this article advocates a position that non-biased translation of Hebrews 4:9 commands Sabbath observance for the people of God. I just want you ready? Hang on here. This is, I say 4, but it's really 5 because you get one for free. Today and today only. There remaineth therefore a rest to the people of God. That's King James. So the Amplified is, so then there is still awaiting a full and complete Sabbath rest reserved for the true people of God. All right, here comes your ESV, English Standard Version. So then, there remains a Sabbath rest for the people of God. NESB. So there remains a Sabbath rest for the people of God. Now here's your one for free. This didn't cost you any extra. Complete Jewish Bible. Complete Jewish Bible. So there remains a Shabbat keeping for God's people. I'm going to read verse 10 just for fun, and maybe 11. For the one who has entered God's rest has also rested from his own works, as God did from his. Therefore, let us do our best to enter that rest, so that no one will fall short because of the same kind of disobedience. Now, here's a little deeper. This is where it gets a little bit heady. The 17th century English nonconformist theologian. How would you like to, remember I like to ask people what they do? Hey, buddy, how you doing? Good to meet you, man. Who do you know here? Yeah, she doesn't like, my dog doesn't like me to say, make like somebody's here. Because then she thinks she's got to kill somebody. That's work, and it's Sunday. She will take a treat, however, if she comes back, like sauntering. I killed him. I ran him off. I didn't have to kill him. It's Sunday. I didn't want to have to, but so I just barked. So the 17th century guy, you see him at a party. I'm assuming they went to parties. What do you do for a living? This would be me. You probably don't ask people this. What do you do for a living? Oh, I'm a 17th century English nonconformist theologian. My name is Matthew Poole. I kind of like it. He provided a typical Protestant interpretation of the verses above. Here the Spirit, capital S, concludes from his former proofs that there is a more excellent rest revealed to faith in the gospel, which is remaining future and to come, and will surely and most certainly do so, though it be behind, yet it will be enjoyed. A Sabbatism, new word, which is a state and season of most glorious rest. It's citing Hebrews 4:10, which I read to you. For the one who has entered God's rest is also rested from his own works, as God did from his. Shall be enjoyed by sincere believers, the true Israel of God, of whom he is proprietor, and who are for their eternal state so excellently holy and of so divine a nature that he is not ashamed to be called their God. Now, that was heady stuff, obviously, because he's got this job. He's a 17th century nonconformist theologian. Those guys, in order to get that job, you got to talk in a really big way. I don't know how it pays, though. I should try it. I'm a little too country for that job, though, I think. So here's the thing. What you saw there, if you picked up any of that, what you saw there was a theologian at then present day, but writing it down, so then we take it to be, coming through to now. He says, this is what he says, there is no present day to that. There is no future of that. It is only then. It is only then that they are to observe the Sabbath celebration. I submit, and Barry submits too, that the translators are misleading the readers. There's another example, and this is what this is. It's just another example of the purposeful attempt to disconnect followers of Yeshua with his Hebraic roots. Now, I've preached all over, and I say that, and people are like, well, I take offense to that. Well, that's okay if you take offense to it, but here's the bottom line. It happens all the time. In the Christian church, nothing against Christians, but in the Christian church, there is always a major attempt to pull away the Hebraic or Hebrew roots of our faith, to pull away, I'll say it more plainly, the Jewishness of our faith. And it is unfortunate. And when I first started hearing this, I was in school. I don't even think it was I started to hear some of it in my undergrad, heard more of it in my master's, and then in my doctorate, it was really heavy. And I started to really get it, and it hurt my brain for a long time. But once I started letting it sink in and started really reading this all the way through, it said, well, wait a second, that does make sense. The word means what it means to the people it's being said to. Right? Remember, I talk about this all the time, that different passages of Scripture have no future indication on it. I know, she's sweet. I love that dog. She does that all the time. She loves holding hands. Talking about my sweet dog, Buckeye. She's sweet. I could do a whole sermon on her. Oh, yeah. She's working it. So the thing is we don't want to remove that futuristic thing here, because this is what's been done for a long time. And if we examine the Greek text, that supports the view. The Greek word for remains is the verb apolepo, and it indicates the sabbatismos is left behind. It still remains. Apolipo is in the present tense indicative mood. Say that with me. Present tense indicative mood. It's fun, right? The present indicative asserts a statement of fact which is occurring while the speaker is making the statement. Nothing more, nothing less. While the speaker is making the statement. Now, conservative scholarship dates the book of Hebrews from the mid to late 60s. You know, everything was crazy in the 60s. We all know that. The writer is expressing a statement of fact about keeping the Sabbath approximately 30 years after the resurrection of Yeshua. Remember, 33 years old, about that space and time, about 60 years. Look, he's close enough to know people who were there. Now, I don't know what happens with this march. There must have been 9 million people that marched with Dr. Martin Luther King. Because, you know, every time you see somebody, these race baiters on television, talking about, well, they marched with Dr. King. Well, he marched with Dr. King. She marched with Dr. King. And Dr. Alveda King, my friend, told me one time, she said, Dr. Sean, you know, if all them people that are all the time saying they marched with my uncle, if they really did march, that would have been a much bigger thing. There'd been a lot more people. So, but the thing is here, we're looking in the 60s, they most likely, anybody commentating on this or thinking about this, they were probably around when this happened. So the bottom line is to get out of the Bible college mode here a little bit, to break it down is, this is not about the future, it's about now. So when they're talking about Sabbath or Shabbat, they're talking about right now. And you guys know one of my favorite, he actually did the Hebrew Greek word study, AMG Hebrew Greek word study Bible. I know I'm a Bible geek. I'm evidencing that now. That's one of my favorite Bibles. I've actually given that Bible to people I thought were very special. And anyway, the point is in this Bible, he breaks down the Hebrew and Greek really intensely. I mean, word by word, so you really have an understanding. But sometimes, even though he's Greek, you get stuff wrong. And here's an example of it. Dr. Zodhiates falls victim to replacement theology in his lengthy discussions of Sabbatismos. Dr. Zodhiates explains in part, therefore, the intimation is that the Sabbath was instituted as a symbol of that eternal rest at the completion of God's work. He is clearly referencing a future rest. A lot of linguistic gymnastics has to occur to move this statement in Hebrews into an event in the future. Yeah, let's face it, that's just a fact. You're working it hard linguistically in order to move that into the future. The Greek word for rest is sabbatismos, and it means to keep the Sabbath. The use of the word rest was added by replacement theologians in an effort to change the commandment to keep the Sabbath into a futuristic event. Yeah, it happens. The correct translation should be, and this is cleared by Dr. Skip Moen, drskipmoen.com, and Barry Jenkins also has a doctorate, I believe, in theology or language, biblical language. There is left behind a keeping of the Sabbath by God's people. That is the actual correct translation of that verse in its entirety. There is left behind a keeping of the Sabbath by God's people. The Sabbath is the sign of God's people being separated to Him. It's written in Exodus 31:13 and 16. Say to the people of Israel, you shall keep my Sabbaths, for this is a sign between me and you throughout your generations, that you may know that I, the Lord, sanctify you. Therefore, the people of Israel shall keep the Sabbath, observing the Sabbath throughout their generations as a perpetual covenant. That's the Revised Standard Version. An accurate translation of Hebrews 9 reveals the failure of the modern church to obey God's command to keep the Sabbath. It's not a futuristic fulfillment, something way down. It's now. It is a command. And listen, when we obey what we're told to do in these tenets, what we have to do is concentrate. We're 21st century God's people. We have to concentrate what this means to keep the Sabbath. If we're a people of God, that's what we have to do. We have to keep the Sabbath. So let's see here. How much time we got left? We only have a little bit left. I just want to give you some of this. Isaiah 30:15-16. For this is what Adonai Elohim, the Holy One of Israel, says: returning and resting is what will save you. Calmness and confidence will make you strong. But you want none of this. No, you say, we will flee on horseback, therefore you will surely flee, and we will ride the swift ones, so your pursuers will be swift. Now, let me just say this. There's an important statement here that says this. This is what God says. Adonai Elohim, the Holy One of Israel, says, returning and resting is what will save you. Has anybody here ever thought in a battle, you know what I need more of in this battle? I need rest. I need to rest a little bit, right? If I was commanding a squad or, leading a squad or whatever, or a team doing whatever, guys, what we're going to do here, we're under heavy intense fire. We've got some RPGs coming in. Instead of popping smoke and getting out of here on the helo, tell you what, let's do. Let's take a little rest. Just a little rest. Let's just rest a little bit. Just a little cat nap, 32 minutes, whatever. Be good. Not more than that, because then you get groggy. We don't want to be groggy in battle. Take a little cat nap, right? We'll rest a little bit, and then we'll be able to fight a little better. Does anybody in this room or listening around the world, do you really think that is what happens? But you see, that's what trips us up a lot of the times. What we think isn't, because we're not thinking with God's mind, we're thinking with our mind. And that's what gets us jacked up. So here's some quotations and some commentary. The work is cited by Mark Buchanan's The Rest of God, Restoring Your Soul by Restoring Sabbath. This guy, if you ever have a chance to read him, Mark Buchanan, The Rest of God. Ooh, so good. So good. In a culture where busyness is a fetish, and stillness is a laziness, rest is sloth. We say that again. In a culture where busyness is a fetish and stillness is laziness, rest is sloth. Now, let me interrupt his excellent writing with something kind of country. You ever know somebody, maybe you're a manager or you have to work with somebody, you would work with them, beside them, or in their same project, and they're all the time acting like, whew, I'm so busy. I can't even, I just got to sit down a second. I'm so busy, I can't even sit down, but you don't ever actually see them, right? There's a lot of bobbing heads, right? Right? You know people, you work with people like that. Now, I've been around you two, at the very least, I've been around you two when we do work with the Michael Strange Foundation. You work the whole time. It's crazy. I'm like, oh man, do they ever sit down? My buddy Jerry is listening, Jerry from Pennsylvania. That man does not understand what retirement is. He knows a lot of words, but he don't know what retirement means. But he's busy working. But you all know people doing real work, accomplishing real things. You accomplish real things. But we all know somebody. It's all the time talking about how busy. Whew, I'm so busy. I can't even hardly catch my breath, Lord. Somebody hand me a drink. Put it in a sippy cup because I don't want to spill while I'm working. But then you look at what they do. They don't get anything done, right? You look at what they do. They get nothing done. I don't like managing people like that because they exasperate me. And obviously it sounds like that's pretty easy to do. So this is a great statement. In a culture where busyness is a fetish and stillness is laziness, rest is sloth. But without rest, we miss the rest of God. The rest he invites us to enter more fully so that we might know him more deeply. Be still and know that I am God. Some knowing is never pursued, only received. And for that, you need to be still. Sabbath is both a day and an attitude to nurture stillness. Mark Buchanan, Rest of God. I have it on Kindle. I read it all the time. It never gets old. If we don't understand, that's from page 3 of that, by the way. If we don't understand God's view of work, we can't understand his view of rest. Have you ever thought about that? That hit me right between the eyes with a 2x4. Straight up, a baseball bat. Wooden, not aluminum. And that hit me when I read that. I said, what? If we don't understand God's view of work, we cannot understand his view of rest. If we don't understand what work really is, we can't understand what rest is, right? We just went through all these gyrations to understand what the word rest in that proper, let me just read you page 24. I know it sounds like I'm kind of an acolyte of Mark Buchanan, because I am. The opposite of slave is not a free man. The opposite of a slave is not a free man. It's a worshiper. The one who is most free is the one who turns the work of his hands into sacrament, into offering. All he makes and all he does are gifts from God, through God, and to God. Virtually any job, no matter how grueling or tedious, can be a gift from God, through God, and to God. The work of our hands, by the alchemy of our devotion, becomes the worship of our hearts. Mark Buchanan. The boy can write. God is more interested in changing your heart than changing your circumstances. His way is not escape, it is acceptance. What did I say last week? I don't know, I don't remember. I have a brain injury. But I have a recording that you can listen to for free to refresh yourself to remember what it is. And what I said last week is very similar to that. Salvation is not this thing where you get teleported all of a sudden to an easy life. And it also doesn't mean that when we become saved that we're suddenly going to escape any of the challenges that other people face. What it means is that we can weather the storm in faith if we so choose. And this is an extension of that. God is absolutely more interested in changing your heart than he is in changing your circumstances. It's not about escape, right? We want to go to heaven. It's okay that you want to go to heaven. Some people want to go to heaven because they hate their life. Right? They hate their life. Some little thing happens and all of a sudden they put those 3 letters. First one starts with an F, then ML. My life. You can pick what the first one is. They hate their life. It was a little stupid thing. I see this on social media. People put those 3 letters on there and I think what you just described is not that hard. Your life is that hard to you? You haven't even had a challenge yet. You're not even in the game. We're talking warm-ups. Right? It's the end of the world for him, and something even minorly a minor obstacle comes in. It's crazy, isn't it? You know people like that. They get tripped up by the littlest, stupidest thing. But God's not interested in changing those circumstances. He's interested in changing our hearts. And what happens if we change our hearts? If we change our hearts, everything changes. Everything changes. Living for the weekend. How many of you know people that live for the weekend? Right? TGIF. Now, I'm not saying that looking forward to the weekend is bad. I'm not saying that. But they live for the weekend. And when you live for the weekend, your life Monday through Friday is crap until you get to the weekend. Evidence is 2 things. You misunderstand the meaning of work, and you misunderstand the view of time. You misunderstand work, and you have a mistaken view of time. That's what it means. It's a sign of 2 things. Leisure, back to Mark Buchanan because he's amazing. Leisure is what Sabbath becomes when we no longer know how to sanctify time. What? Sanctify time? Have you ever thought of such a thing? Sanctify time. What do we not ever get back? Time. That should be our most precious thing. We should never ever look time in the face, look a gift horse in the mouth, right? We should never ever do that. Time is the thing we don't get back, we can't make more of. When it's over, this second is over, this minute is over, this day is over. And if you screw the day up because you are in a bad mood, or you have a bad view of life, or you have a bad view of work, or you have a bad view of everything else, your time will be a waste. It will be a disrespecting of the gift of the moments of life that God has given us, because that's the only way we have breath in our lungs. Leisure is what Sabbath becomes when we no longer how to sanctify time. Leisure is Sabbath, bereft of the sacred. It is a vacation, literally a vacating, an evacuation. As Rybczynski sees it, leisure has become despotic in our age, enslaving us and exhausting us, demanding from us more than it gives. You see what he's saying? There are people spending a whole lot of time trying to look busy, and then there are also a whole lot of people whose life is so bereft of stillness, quietness, quiet contemplation of things far bigger than them, that the fetish of being a person who works every possible waking minute of every day And when I'm saying this, I'm pointing back at myself because I joked around a little bit. Maybe I don't like the word workaholic. I wasn't addicted to work. I just felt like it needed to be done. It's got to be done. I don't want to see any whining in me. And I wanted to set a good example for my children to say, hey, and people around me and people that work with me, if I'm not willing to get in there and get after it, will they be? No, you can't lead that way. But let's face it, when you get to 80 or 90 hours a week in working, we're going a little crazy up in here. Now, I have a dear friend. I won't say their name because he's actually been on my show. He's a former Army Ranger officer, and his wife is a physician, and she's in the early stages. You know, she just got out of medical school, and she's in the residency internship. I don't know which, but they work 100 hours. It's the stupidest system I've ever seen in my life, and I rail against it, and it's so difficult. Now, she doesn't whine and complain because she values what she does, but it's crazy hard on you. It kills you. It ages you big time. It's just nuts. It seems counterintuitive to me. But we all know somebody who says, you say, hey, how about taking off on Sunday or Saturday or Friday, whatever your Sabbath is? Sabbath? Who's got time for that? Man, I got work to do. I can't sit around. Sit around a whole day? There's no way in this world I can sit around a whole day. I can't sit around a whole day. I won't make money to live on. My family depends on me. That's the next thing we do, isn't it? That's our excuse. My family's dependent on me. If I don't do it, nobody else will. I got to do it. I got kids that need feeding. Look at him. He don't eat soon. He's going to fall away to nothing. Right? He's sensitive. I got a dog there I got to feed. I got people I got to feed. Got to keep the bills paid, right? So that's my excuse. Oh, and I can't take no Sabbath. What, are you out of your mind? You got to be out of your mind. Something's wrong with you. Chronos, or time, is the presiding deity of the driven. Now here's the destination question. If I stay on this track, where will it take me? If I live my life like that, that person who says, I don't have time for Sabbath, are you kidding me? I don't have time for that. Where's this take you if you live like that? Only those that wait on the Lord renew their strength. What is wait? W-A-I-T. Wait. What do you have to do when you're waiting? What is it? Hurry up and wait. That's the military way, man. Hurry up and wait. But what do you have to do when you're waiting? Be still. You have to be still. The Sabbath begins with sleep. Do you realize that? The Sabbath begins with sleep. It begins in the evening. In a world without electricity, the Sabbath meal and liturgy lasts only as long as the candles last. And then comes sleep, a time when we are no longer in control, when we return to infancy. A city that never sleeps is a slap in God's face. New York City brags, we're the city that never sleeps, right? It's a blatant statement of idolatry of the highest order. It stands in opposition to everything about God's creation and character. We sleep simply because we believe that God will look after us. That's on page 63 of Mark Buchanan's. It's one of the books you have, and you'll read the ink off the page. You'll read it over and over and over. Maybe that's just me. Sabbath depends on trust, folks. You've got to trust God in order to Sabbath. You've got to trust God. You've got to let go of your need to control every circumstance and set aside the labor, the effort to control. What's a better word? Instead of workaholic, you are a control freak. How many people do you know? I got to control everything. Got to control everything. Got to be in charge of everything because I got to control everything. You can't do it your way. Got to do it my way. Why? My way is right. If I'm not involved, it won't be right. But then I'll have to redo it when you're not looking. Right? Unless we trust God. Unless we trust God. In this sense, Sabbath keeping is a tangible sign of the level of confidence you have in God. Let me give you an example. Wait, no, I'm going to give you, let's see if you think of it. Now I want to ask you, who can enter into rest? Only those calm, unhurried people who live in each moment fully, savoring simple things, celebrating small epiphanies, unafraid of life's inevitable surprises and reverses, adaptive to change yet not chasing after it. The truly purposeful have an ironic secret. They manage time less and pay attention more. I want to ask you, those of you who were runners or athletes, have you ever run in the rain? It was raining when you started, and you say, well, I'm going to go run in the rain. You don't say that. You say, I'm just going to go run. And then you notice things. Things start to come to you when you're in that space in your head. You're moving, you're running, but you're still. And you're taking in something that is different. Most people don't run in the rain. It's almost like a meditation. Only those calm, unhurried people who live each moment fully, savoring simple things, celebrating small epiphanies, unafraid of life's inevitable surprises and reverses, adaptive to change yet not chasing after it. Sometimes things in our lives change. How many of you have been in a situation, in a relationship, where that relationship changed? Where the person changed? And what do you have to do? Sometimes when that's the case, I was just talking to a person, in their life has been turned upside down. Things have gone completely sideways, and now trying to say, what do I do now? What do I do now? And I say, don't chase after that. Don't keep chasing after that. That wasn't for you. That might have been for a season, for some lesson, but that's not for you to chase after. That time is gone. It's past. Now it's your time to reflect. It's your time to think it through and say, okay, what was the lesson to learn in that? The truly purposeful have an ironic secret. They manage time less and pay attention more. I want you to think about this, and Mark Buchanan really puts this beautifully. Yeshua wandered in order to bless. Nowhere in the Bible does it say, okay, boys, y'all go ahead and get out your Franklin Covey daytimer. Let's go ahead and get it out. Turn to this page for this day. We're going to have a list here. We're going to get on through this list, and then this is where we're going. This is our itinerary. This is where we're going on all these places. We're going to go to these places. This is what we're going to do. No. What'd they do? They walked and they wandered and they stumbled upon blessing after blessing, an opportunity to bless after opportunity to bless. There wasn't some big criteria. What I say about the centurion, right? He says, "Hey, my daughter's dead, but I know if you come, she's going to live." That was a last minute change, right? At the daytimer meeting, I don't think they had that. At the daytimer meeting, they didn't say, Yeshua didn't say, "Hey, by the way, while we're over here doing this guy's going to come up to me and I'm going to be really tired, but this is going to happen, so we're going to need to do this. So I need you guys to have everything loaded up. We'll go over there, we'll handle our business. We'll make this." Oh, and another woman, she's going to come up to me, right? She's going to touch me. She's not going to say anything. She got this hemorrhage deal going on. We don't talk too much about that. But the bottom line is she's going to touch my talit, the hem, and then she's going to be healed. And I'm like, who touched me? Right? Okay, put that in there. You guys write that in there in case I forget. No, it was none of that. It was none of that at all. To redeem time, you must be aware of kairos as an interruption of chronos. Sabbath is kairos practice. To refuse Sabbath is in effect to spurn the gift of freedom. Y'all want to guess who wrote that? Mark Buchanan. You buy the book if you want to. I might have bought the last copy. You don't know. Right, with Kindle. I love it when it says on there, 3 left. It actually does that sometimes. You'll see it on, like if you buy my Kindle book, The Excellent Skill of the Church, How Mediocrity is Destroying America, sometimes, and I've called them and said, why is this on there? That doesn't, 3 left. There can't be 3 left. Yeah, I better get it, right? There's only 3 left. It's a Kindle. They're not printing anything, but you can get the regular one. And if you live near me, I'll sign it. To refuse Sabbath is in effect to spurn the gift of freedom. It'll be instantly worth half, by the way. I sign it's worth half. It is, that's a joke grenade. Somebody will get that in a minute. It is to resume willingly what we once cried out for God to deliver us from. It is choosing what we once shunned. Slaves don't rest. Slaves can't rest. Slaves, by definition, have no freedom to rest. Rest, as it turns out, is a condition of freedom. You don't get to rest unless you're free. And sometimes that freedom begins with saying, look, I'm going to take a day and I'm going to focus on my relationship with God. Maybe that's your day. If you want to understand the Bible better, you say, that's my day. I'm going to read for an hour. But I'm a busy business person. People are going to be calling me. They have this little switch on your phone called off. You say, well, it won't be able to make it without me. Yes, it will. Yes, it will. You'd be shocked to know it will. Unless your business is a surgeon and you're the only surgeon, I don't recommend that. But if your business is something else where people's lives don't depend on it, I think it'll be okay. You say, well, then I'll have to hire somebody. How much do you want to be a slave if you own your own business? Do you want to be a slave? People crack me up. Wasn't it funny? I mean, people would always assume we were rich. I don't know why they ever think we were rich. I've had pastors cozy on up to me if I was in their church trying to think I'm rich or something, and talking about always wanting me to be involved in things. We'd like you to participate in this and that. Participate, by the way, is church speak for we want you to give more money to this thing. That's what we want you to do. Anyway, people think, we've actually had people say, well, you got it easy. You got your own business. I had shock face. There's a picture of me on the internet with my shock face. I'll send it around. Look, they actually said that, and I think to myself, you've got to be kidding me. You have your own business. You've got it easy. You're out of your mind. Because when I finally do get back to my house, I go to my desk and I work till 1 o'clock in the morning, and then I get up at 5. I can't do math anymore, but that's a lot of not very many hours. Right? And I'm not whining and complaining because at some point, you're in your own business for a certain period of time. The objective is to stop being a slave to your business, to replicate yourself so that you can rest. You say, well, they're in the business in the world that would be successful in that model, shutting down for a whole day. Anybody ever drive up to Chick-fil-A and say, I'm going to get me a Chick-fil-A sandwich today, right here, right now? And you drive up and guess what? You stand at the speaker, or you're sitting in your car at the speaker. You've rolled your window down, you press the button, your window goes down, and you're like, hello, hello, hello. Right? She doesn't like that when I do that. You can tell she doesn't like that. So you say hello, and then guess what happens? Nobody's there. You know why? Because they're closed on Sunday. You know what Chick-fil-A is? Number one. In their industry, they are number one. Guess who they're ahead of? McDonald's. They're number one in profitability. I figured I'd wait for a minute to tell you that. They're number one in profitability. They make more money off every dollar spent than any other company that does what they do. In their segment, in their industry, they're number one. Chick-fil-A. We love them, right? Chick-fil-A. They train their people right. A condition of freedom. Sabbath is a condition of freedom. Let my people go that they might worship me. I'm almost finished. But worship begins with rest. Let my people go that they might rest in me, that they might trust me to provide. Let my people go that they might experience my grace, for they cannot find this rest as slaves to another master. Oswald, in My Utmost for His Highest, verses John the Immerser, you know him as John the Baptist, I must decrease so that He can increase. Sabbath is the practice of emptying myself to God, to God's world, and to others. This is the life you can expect if you start honoring Sabbath or Shabbat. Fuller, richer, more satisfying, deeper, and slower. Look, I've talked to a lot of business people, in both in my lifetime and oddly this week, and I've talked to a lot of people who say, look, man, I'm just afraid that if I take off even a day, everything's going to fall apart. Tell you what, can I make a deal with you? Can I take off but keep used to be pager, right? Anybody remember pagers? I just keep my pager on. I'll just keep it on. I'll be on call, but I'm not going to go into this is the deal. I'm not going to go into the office. I'm not going to go into the work, but I'll be at home and I'll have this and I'll just do that right there. What did I used to always do? I have my phone with me all the time. I always be checking my phone. Check my phone. Some work thing could have happened. Some project, some mission, something, obviously it's going to fail without me, right? I'm so important, right? It's going to fail without me. Can't possibly go on without me. That's another big fallacy, folks. That's the biggest thing. We want to think that we're so important and so necessary that we can't step away for one day. One day. When I ask you something, do you think your relationship, your closeness with God, could stand just one day? Then why do we think that resting one day and the meaning of that rest is to be still and know that I am God? Why do we think if we skip over that one day that somehow we're going to be better off, that somehow we're going to be more peaceful, that somehow that little tiny bit of money, that extra that we might make on that day, that somehow or another, that's going to be what puts us over? I tell you, folks, I was a financial planner for 10 years at a very high level. And I can tell you, most of the folks I sat across from, they were estate planning clients and trust clients. They weren't scrimping. They were very wealthy people. But I'm going to tell you this. When I first got my start in the business, I wasn't sitting in front of those kind of people. I was sitting in front of regular, everyday people who had serious money problems. And you know what I learned? The answer to a money problem is never money. The answer to the problem of there's not enough hours in the day is never adding time. Why? Because unless we are God, and we aren't, we can't add time to our day. My encouragement to you this week is to take a day. Sabbath not being the day, take a day. Pick a day. If you're a first responder and you work shift work, or you work Saturdays and Sundays or whatever day, and you look at, maybe your shift changes, maybe your schedule changes. You look at a day and you say, that's going to be my Sabbath next week. Most people have a schedule, at least can we agree that's reasonable? A week in advance, that'll be my Sabbath. That day I'm going to make a special purpose to get closer to God, to be still and to be quiet, and to not lay my hand to a bunch of other things. Not immerse myself in worry. Quietness and stillness. You have to take the day in order to enjoy the day. Thank you for joining us. God bless you. Join us on Wednesday. I might have a special episode at some point this week. You just never do know. If you have the Apple phone, the iPhone, your app is available and free. Go to the App Store, search the Ninja Pastor, boom, pops up. Takes about less than a minute to download. You get notifications, everything. It's free. It's easy. It's a piece of cake. You'll love it. Android app may be out this week. We would just love it if it does, and then we'll get that out to you right away. Follow me on social media. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I'm on Tumblr, I found out, and LinkedIn. Join us all on that. Be looking for Wednesday. It's going to be a show. It will either be your first show, your 100th show, or your last show, depending on where you come down on the topic. God bless you. Thank you for joining us.